Okay, guys, I think we can start now. Turn on my video here. And then thank you everybody for joining. We were expecting around 18 or 20 people, so maybe some will still join, but let's not keep you waiting and punish you for being on time. So let's get started here, okay? All right, so today's webinar is about STEM in particular, and then what scholarships, financial aid, are available for, we're going to focus primarily on the US, in fact, wholly on the US, because as I said, if you did attend our previous webinar, then you would know that still predominantly 98% of the students choose to go to the US. So that's where we're focusing as well. Okay. Just a couple of mute. I will have, but until then, please be on forward your questions also. Okay. All right. So let's get going. And before we start, those of you that have attended the last webinar will notice that this is a very familiar slide. So what we're basically saying here is, if you stand out, which is what we say to students for college applications in general, and then if you're talking about a scholarship, then it really becomes pertinent that you stand out from the rest to get those dollars from the universities. Okay. And then I wanted to also quickly show you guys, the criteria, the college criteria again, in the sense, if you did see this slide before, or if you've attended the previous webinar, they should be familiar to you. And you'll see, the various criteria used by colleges, right? For admission, obviously, they're also right. So let's move on here. So on the agenda, we have, obviously, foreign education is expensive, and we won't go into that much. In fact, we won't go into that at all. You can easily Google and get that information, but generally, typically, I would say in the US, you have to spend about 60,000 US dollars. Sorry, guys, I meant to share my screen and I didn't do that, so I'm going to do it now. It's something I should learn to do. I haven't learned yet. So what I did speak briefly about, this webinar, and then this slide I had shown earlier in the previous webinar also. Okay, so what this slide is saying is you should stand out. Okay, so the red car among a bunch of white cars. Enough said. And then these are the college admissions criteria. They should also be familiar to a lot of you guys if you've been to other webinars or been to Uwezo before. These are all the criteria for admission, but also become very critical for scholarship as well. Okay. All right. Foreign education is expensive. We all know that. So uh, in the US, we're saying, and that covers your everything. Your okay. And that's just a approximate. And then, STEM. What is it? Does it really matter? We'll talk about that a little bit. And then, what are common STEM majors and what are not so common? We found at least one. And then what does it mean to major in the STEM area? And then we get into financial aid. So financial aid is an umbrella term that covers a lot of things: scholarships, grants, loans, etc. Okay. We will talk a lot about merit scholarships, perhaps more than the others, because whether you are a US citizen, non-resident, or a non-US citizen, international student, Merit scholarships are the best chance you have. Okay, you'll find out why. Okay, and then we'll talk about a couple of things, called FAFSA and CSS. These are applications you fill out essentially to become eligible to get scholarships, etc. And there are other things as well we'll touch upon, like college specific, and there is something called a need blind financial aid. And then we talk about grants. There's not a whole lot in terms of grant. They're really targeting people who need the money badly, right? So most international students who are willing to, go abroad and spend 50, $60,000, per year, obviously it'd be very difficult for them to show that they're in bad need of a loan, or I should say a grant. Grant is something you don't have to pay back. It's not a loan, it's just a gift. And there are some, but very few in India to support you. And then loans, we'll talk about a little bit. And then, I kind of will show you, how this college matchmaking works from a Uwezo perspective. Okay. And then we'll have Q&A. All right. Moving right along. Okay. STEM. I mean, we all know the definition, right? So these are some of them, the majors. You can list them all. There's a bunch of them, right? Most of you know computer science, engineering, data science, etc., etc. They all fall into STEM. But so do biology, astronomy, statistics, pharmacy, etc. Okay, so these are all called STEM majors. Sorry. Okay, and then some universities, okay, what they've decided is that economics at their university, the main difference, right, is that, right, here on the screen, they can declare a particular major to be a STEM major. And these people have, declared economics in their universities as STEM. Okay. Now, what does it mean though? Now, many of the STEM majors, and not the ones we talked about, biology or physics, which are STEM majors, or chemistry or something like that, for an international student, that's going to be kind of difficult to find employment. Okay. So that's why I said not all of the STEM majors, but some of the STEM majors, mainly driven around technology, are in demand. Okay, so as an international student, that's important to you if you're willing to or if you're going to seek employment after your graduation. Okay, and then the training period is 3 years for STEM majors. That is one of the biggest advantages one can get with a STEM major, right? And then for other majors, it's only 1 year. So then after graduation, you get 1 year of training visa, if you will, right? And then if you do computer science or any variations of it, electrical engineering or mechanical engineering, and anything like that, then you get 3 years. And that could become important for working visa. You all heard about H1 and all that. Okay. So that is what the STEM degree means. Now, this doesn't mean that everybody should go to a STEM major, right? Do what you love, do what you enjoy. The 1 year, many times, we do have a lot of students that we send to non-STEM majors, mainly business, economics, etc., design, fashion design, etc. So it's not something you should worry about too much, but I just did want you to understand that the STEM major has a differentiator, right? There are certain advantages, and it's only good for you if you actually like those subjects, okay? You can do what you want, follow your passion. Now, no matter what you're going to do, right? You have to follow, make sure that you must do your homework. And you'll understand why by the, after a few more slides, but it's not as straight, simple as saying, okay, I'm a STEM major, etc. But do your homework, okay? All right. Now let's move on to financial aid. As I mentioned, financial aid, comes in many forms, in terms of scholarship, grants, etc. Okay. Now there are two. Let's go ahead and do this also. This is a free application for federal student aid. That's what this FAFSA stands for, and predominantly is for U.S. citizens or U.S. permanent residents. Okay, there may be a couple of exceptions here and there. If you happen to be working there and contributing taxes, etc., depending on how that could make a difference. But I would say majority, 99% of the time, it's only for U.S. citizens or green card holders. Now the form is long. It does ask you for a lot of etc. etc. But so when I say you, I'm talking about you as a student. However, you won't have all that income, so you'll have to provide from your parents. And then what happens with the information is that universities and colleges use the data in FAFSA about the students to make financial aid decisions. Okay. Now, college scholarship service is another way that is more important for international students, because this is the only way, because most of you, in fact, like I said, you don't qualify for FAFSA. So you go to CSS and you do a similar thing. Okay. This is actually hosted by the College Board, if you will, and then everyone is eligible to use it. Okay. No differentiation there. And a number of colleges use this. They will tell you on their website. It's very easy to find out. Institutional financial aid. That's important because you saw and you still see on the slide, right? The FAFSA, the word federal, that's from the federal government, right? So the CSS profile, when we talk about institutional financial aid, we're talking about the funding that comes from the university or college. Okay. So it's not from the government. That's why international students also qualify for this. Very important to know. Okay. So now some of them also have like if I graduated from, well, a lot of people have done that in the US, but even here, right? So I think Vinod Khosla and some of these IIT alum, right? They gave a lot of money to where they graduated from. And very recently in IIT Madras, I happen to know that person is related to me, who donated a very I don't know much about that particular technology, but I know he's in the field of making airplane parts, for example. So that machine was worth about 28 million. Now, in the US, what happens is a lot of people will donate about 5 million, 10 million to their alma mater, right, to the college that they went to, but they will say it's for specific purposes. Sometimes corporations do that. For example, they may do CSR type funding and say, give $1 million and say it's only for women or minorities and things like that. So this is mostly for your information. I don't spend 50, 60,000 US dollars per year. I don't think you can prove to somebody that you desperately need it or that you're in a minority, right? I mean, technically speaking, of course, in the US, we're not white. Indians are a minority, but not really financially. In fact, they're the number one, income making groups, excuse me, in the US. Okay, continue with that, right? The college specific financial aid. Now, what we're giving you here is a flavor, right? These are very, I would say, very broad and quite specific in terms of what you need to do to qualify, as well as the number of scholarships a college might present you with, but you do have to meet certain criteria. Okay. And I can give you one example or a couple of examples. There's something called the Stamps President Scholarship by Georgia Tech. And then for international students also, you can get up to 100%. Okay, now this is again a merit scholarship. Okay, So basically, if you go back to the first slide where I showed you the cars and the red Ferrari standing out, essentially these type of scholarships are very tough to get. I mean, they have a lot of money. Okay, these universities do have a lot of money, but you do have to stand out in your application to be able to get the merit scholarships. And many times you don't really have to apply, but sometimes you do. Okay. All right. Another example is something called a trustee scholarship from Boston University, and that's 100% again. Now I'm giving you a couple of examples of 100%. There is a obviously between 0 and 100, right? So a lot of, some of them give you 25%, some scholarships you can only get 50%, but I'm giving you the best case scenario to be positive, right? But again, please keep in mind, they are looking for good students and outstanding students, but the money that they spend, they do have it, but you do have to stand out. Okay, now we talked a little bit about need blind financial aid, right? So what need blind means is they don't consider your financial status, your financial situation when they make the admission. Some of the colleges have listed here, right, which claim and which are need blind are, of course, the usual suspects. You shouldn't be surprised to see Yale, MIT, Harvard. Harvard, last time I checked, it has over 100 billion, billion with a B as in boy, um, you know, in their, that's how much money they have to spend. Of course, they're not going to spend it all on students, but just so you know, that's the kind of money we're talking about. So in the billions for most universities, Yale, MIT shouldn't be too far behind. But I did throw in a couple of colleges which you may not have heard about. One college called Amherst College, right? This is what typically is called a liberal arts college, and so is the next one, Budwan College, right? So just FYI, the next webinar we're doing is exclusively focused on some of these colleges we're calling the other Ivy League, okay? But you should know that the need blind applies here. Now, there is a catch sometimes that you'll be accepted, but depending on how much you need and then how much the whole kitty is, right? That the university is willing to spend on need blind students, you may or may not actually get all the money. So just a catch there, like I said earlier, right? So do your homework. Okay. So that's the one I just mentioned. Sometimes you may end up getting the admission, but not all the money you need. So you may decide to actually not accept that. That is entirely possible. Now, when small is big, what I mean by that is, see, in India, and I would say Asia in general, India is no exception. A lot of students and parents, it's changing a little bit, right? Are kind of married to the concept of, the big names and, everybody says Ivy League, but there's at least 20 universities I can think of top of my head that are just as good or better than the Ivy League, right? So that's a legacy that is kind of stuck on. It's like the Mercedes Benz in a car analogy, for example, right? But in the US, there are many colleges which are small. I gave you a couple of examples. The Amherst College, by the way, is one of the top ranked colleges um, among the liberal arts colleges, as I mentioned. That's a term they use, but alongside of universities like Harvard or Berkeley or Northwestern and things like that. Okay, so it's just too bad that in India people are not aware of it. So I wanted to give you an example of some of the smaller colleges, right? And the quality is very high, and they claim that all their classes are taught by PhDs. And that's important because in the well-known schools like Yale or MIT, Harvard, etc., many times the first 2 years of college, you won't see a professor in a small room. Usually it's a lecture hall with 400 people. Okay. So the smaller colleges, which I'm just, the bullet that you saw there, they're smaller but high quality colleges at the same time, right? And they do offer financial aid to everybody. Okay. So one example being the Marquis Fellowship and the Marquis Scholarship, right? This is from Lafayette College and it's merit based. but it's up to 100%. Okay, so you would have known this college, which has all of, I'm guessing now, but around 3,000 students. That's all it has, right? Its corpus is $1 billion, again with a B as in Bombay or boy, right? A small college like that has a corpus of $1 billion. So you can imagine how rich the bigger universities must be. Okay. Another example. This is need based. However, this is also a small college. Again, very well known and very difficult to get in, by the way. So we only hear about, the big names and all that kind of stuff, but these colleges are very high quality. As I mentioned, the class size is very small, something like 20 students. And as you go up in your college journey up to your junior year, senior year, that number may drop to 10, right? So some people like that, okay? So it's a need-based scholarship. However, it is 100%. All right. Now let's talk about grants and loans, although like I said in the beginning, it's very difficult for international students. Grants are generally Merry Christmas, so it's, hey, just take it, that's fine, right? So you don't have to pay it back. Now each college will have various types of grants. Remember, I gave you a couple of examples, some from alumni, some from corporations, some from wherever, right? So they'll have different grants, and the amounts will vary, and the criteria will vary, right? Right? So they may have a grant for women engineers. Okay. Now, many times these grants are available to all students, meaning US as well as non-US citizens, right? Meaning international students. However, the criteria will vary. Sometimes they're very tight criteria, and the amount also can vary. Now, when you choose your colleges, etc., you can actually check what kind of grants they have, etc. Because there is no possible way, even if I had 2 hours. And there are some in India, right? So Tata Scholarship, some of you may have heard about. At Cornell, I believe they donated like 25 million, right? So that's only at Cornell University though, right? And then there is something called the Rotary. Everybody knows the Rotary Club, right? So in Rotary International, they have something called the Ambassadorial Scholarship, but it's only 25K and it's only 1 year, right? So you'll be hard pressed to find, especially if you are not from a very very low income, or from a small village or something like that. There are organizations which are doing a great job of supporting those students who really can't afford, forget college abroad, college here, right? So that's a different bucket altogether, right? Now let's talk about loans. In the US, if you want to get a loan from a US as a US citizen or a permanent resident, okay? Now, I put a star there because I'm not a big fan of taking loans, like anywhere, okay? Because there's a big issue that is happening today, has happened in the past, where many college students were not able to pay back their loans because getting the loan is the easy part, right? But paying it back is very difficult. The terms are difficult, etc. So a lot of kids struggle for years after graduation. So anyway, in the you get a loan from private organizations in India, right? The second bullet, their loans are almost always in the US from private entities and are expensive, right? They don't sound like that in the beginning, but it's a big business in the US, perhaps in India also, right? So you can actually get loans in India. You know, funding your foreign education with loans, is that a good idea or not? That's a purely personal choice. That's not something I would like to speak to, right? Everybody's situation is different. If you want to, not just this, but if you have any other questions in general, of course, we're always available. But I'm not a big fan of, taking on so much loan in education. But like I said, things are different for different people. So, like in the US, an undergrad degree, once you have in computer science or any related field, you start off working and your starting salary today is around $100,000, maybe more actually, right? A year. And then by the time anybody here, even if you're in 12th grade, right, you're about 5 years away from getting into the employment world. I mean, that number may reach 120, 130, whatever, right? So yeah, it's good money. So those are equations you have to keep in mind, but we don't advise in terms of should you take a loan or not. Okay. All right. Wanted to share with you. Let me actually, I can't see something in the screen entirely. Okay, there you go. Want to share with you how we do it, right? So the matchmaking, as you see on the top, um, everybody's needs are different. Okay, so when they come in, we choose colleges based on individuals' desire for, big school, small school, but also financial aid. If they're looking for something, it's common sense, right? If you have a very good resume, and then you want to go to a college which generally doesn't receive that good resumes, let's just say that, right? So naturally they want you to attend, they want you to go to their university or college. They will give you some scholarship or some grant, etc., to attract you. Okay, so notice here at the bottom, I circle essentially a very small fraction of the plan we create for every student that does college applications with us, right? So you'll see that a list of colleges, all the essay prompts, notes, etc., blah, blah, blah. But I wanted to make sure. So what we do here and what I couldn't do in the small amount of time we have here is that the scholarship tab, the red circle you see, will have everything that we have selected in terms of the colleges. And for each college, if it applies, we'll tell you what kind of scholarships are available and then what you need to do to be in line to get one of those scholarships. Okay. So that's important to know. And then, of course, this service that we have also gives you all the essay prompts in the list of colleges. We go by the profile of the student as well as what the requirements are. Big school, small school, my parents are, have somebody living somewhere kind of stuff. So all those can be taken into account, including the fact that if you're looking for some kind of financial aid that can $10,000 to a full scholarship of 50 or $60,000, depending on the profile, depending on the college. Okay, so it is possible, but like I said, you do have to stand out. Okay, so your best shot at getting a scholarship is be one among hundreds. In China, the most populous countries, but US itself is a huge country, and everybody essentially wants to go to the top 30 universities, which is where Uwezo learning plays as well, right? But your best shot at getting any kind of financial aid is to get a merit scholarship. Okay. All right, that was my presentation in terms of the slides I wanted to share with you. Now I can take any questions if anybody has. Any questions? No questions. I see some in the chat. Let's see. Thank you. Okay. All right. So if there are no questions, then we'll end the meeting. Okay. So please, if you don't remember anything else today, right? Think of the first slide I put up here, right? So now, if you are a parent and your child is in 12th grade, there's not that much you can do to kind of turn into a red card, right? I mean, you have about 3 months, 4 months, whatever, right? I mean, it's still possible to improve your resume, and you should do that, for a better admission. But if you're in 11th grade, I'll help you with that. But this is what it is in terms of what colleges want is if you want admission on top of that, you want a scholarship, then obviously you have to stand out. And the other message is that there are many, many schools that you probably have not heard about. And I gave you a couple of examples which have a lot of money that they want to spend on top students. They're not well known, but they're well known within the US, and the education that you get is fantastic there as well. Okay? All
So,
right then.
is a good resume mandatory for the enrollment of bachelor's program?
A good reason to get admission, you mean?
Oh, yeah.
So you're not asking about scholarship, just admission, right?
So, means a good resume for a top college. Is that
I didn't get the last part. A good resume for college?
means is that necessary?
Well, I mean,
Means the university does the university check for that?
so obviously there are many components, right? So if you look at this slide, right? So these are all the categories. For the sake of argument, we do believe that rankings are very subjective, right? But for the sake of this discussion, let's say number one university versus number 51, right? The criteria are still the same. Okay. So number 1 to 10 universities might say we're looking for people, who have nothing less than a 95% in every subject all through high school. The 51st ranked university might say we're looking for the criteria are the same, but the cutoff points will be different. Now, fortunately, in the US, there are at least 100 universities and colleges that you can get fantastic education in, right? So not everybody can and not everybody does, and neither should everybody plan on going to just the Ivy League, right? So there are
What's the difference between the top 10 universities and the top 100 universities? Means the quality of
many, many
education.
colleges, and not much, right? So that's a good question. So the only difference I would say is that in the top 10 universities, let's say top 20 because top 10 is so narrow. Top 20 universities, the kids that get in there, right, are obviously going to be those who have been topping their respective high schools or in the top 2% or something like that, right? So if you look at that all over the world, then the kids that go to the top 20 universities are all of that type, right? If you go to another college which is like ranked 31 or 51 whatever, you will still have those kids also, because from a cost perspective, for residents of a state, okay, let's take California as an example, where some of the top colleges in the world are in California, right? So there are some public and some private. So public ones, almost everybody has heard about: Berkeley, UCLA, UC San Diego, etc., right? Private ones, Stanford, is one of the top ones, if not, it's above the Ivies, right? University of Southern California down in down south, right, is also a good private school. So for the kids who are Berkeley or a state university can be a third of what it would be to go to Stanford or USC. Okay, so the thing is, all these universities are the requirements are the same. Okay, but the cost will play a big role into the state colleges, meaning public universities where you're competing with a lot of residents also. Okay, so in general, if you look at the colleges, right, the criteria or this is nearly true, right? The 1580 would be like on the low end for them, right? But for some university like let's say Boston University, which is also a very good university, if although that's only one criterion, right? So you didn't look at all these criteria looking on the slide here, right? But just to give you an example, the criteria are the same, the cutoff points can be different. Okay.
So, what's the difference between studying in the private and in the public university?
There's no difference for an international student. The cost is going to be about the same, right?
Oh,
It's
means
only
the
about the
quality
cost.
of education.
Yeah, the quality of education, like I just told you, right? So Stanford, it's more difficult to get into Stanford than Harvard, right?
Yes, sir.
So in terms of private, public, they all have the same high quality. Okay, so Berkeley is a public university and Stanford is a private university. But there is no difference in terms of, from a cost perspective, there is not much of a difference, even though some private universities are even more expensive than the number I gave you, 60,000, right? Some can go very high, but cost. But for international student, you will end up paying about the same, although USC is very expensive, kind of pricey among private universities. Okay, but the quality is good no matter where you go. And also, along with the small colleges I mentioned, right, 2, 3, 4,000 students is all they have, small classrooms, etc., etc. But they have a lot of money also at the same time. So it's not straightforward to pick a college, right? So you do have to talk to experts and figure out your requirements, and then what that those experts like Uwezo can do for you. Okay. Any other questions? All right then. If not, I think that's it for today. Thank you for joining. And then if you have any questions, you can always reach out to us. And the easiest way would be go to our website or send an email to info@uslearning.com. Okay. Thank you for joining, guys. Take care.